Hello, everybody.
Hello.
We're almost mid-January. Do you believe it? It's crazy.
No.
I want to say, where did this year go? But it's only January. But I can
know.
say, where did this month go?
Yeah.
But we're back.
Always flying.
And we're back with a good friend.
Mhm.
Priyanka.
Hi,
Juneja.
Priyanka.
How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited about this.
Absolutely. So today we thought this would be the perfect time. We're going to talk about travel, but primarily solo travel for women. And just to give our listeners a little sort of history, Priyanka and I met through an accelerator program, and she was building an app to basically help women travel solo, right? And to do it with confidence and to feel safe. And let me ask you, are you still developing that, or it was called Hera Travel?
Yeah, it was called Hera Travel. So no, I exited that actually a year ago now. But I'm always working on travel and helping women and helping them travel more. So while I'm not working on that exact concept anymore, pretty much what I'm doing now is still really relevant to getting more women on the road.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Plus, you own it fully. Like, it's interesting because you're a blogger and a podcaster, and we're bloggers and podcasters, so we get it. Like, it's fully your spirit, your word, your experiences.
Yes.
And so, before we dive into the questions, Priyanka is a blogger. Her blog is called Champagne Flight, and then she is also a podcaster, and it's called Wandering CEO, or is it The Wandering CEO?
Just Wandering CEO.
Wandering
Yeah.
CEO. So why don't you share a little bit about each of them, the blog and the podcast, and then does your community get out of that? Like, what are you bringing to your community?
Yeah, absolutely. So Champagne Flight is a travel blog that's really evolved with my own personal travel style. So it's really a site for those who want to get a little bit more out of travel. So not just check off, all the tourist attractions in a city, but are more interested in getting deeper and taking their travels to the next level. So I primarily write about underrated wine regions, foodie experiences. One of my main motivators for travel is food, because I think it's a great way to connect to the local culture. And I also write more about slower travel, taking your time to experience a city. And that, again, is a huge reflection of how my own personal travel style has evolved, because I definitely was, when I was younger, and, staying in hostels and trying to see as much as possible and hopping around. And that's just not how I travel anymore. So I think what my community really gets out of the travel blog is a lot of my personal recommendations. I'm really honest. If I don't like something, I will write it on the blog and be like, this is something I would possibly skip. And I also am really good at finding more off the beaten path locales, even in a popular destination. So for example, I wrote a blog post on Santorini, and it, really didn't have any of the typical things to do in Santorini, because if you don't like crowds, for example, I found places that are a little bit more kind of relaxed and a little bit more authentic as well. So that's Champagne Flight. Really enjoy writing that. Again, it's evolving with me as my travel style evolves. And then Wandering CEO, it's a podcast that was kind of born out of that experience with building out Hera Travel with Champagne Flight. And so it's more about my journey to building a career that allows me to live the life that I want to live, have more freedom, flexibility, fulfillment, and of course, to be able to travel as much as possible. So a listener who wants to be on that similar journey, who wants to incorporate maybe travel and maybe just more joy into her life, that's what the podcast is all about.
That's really cool. I feel like that there's a trend, sort of like, just becoming your own CEO and doing what you love every day and really embracing that and putting everything you have into it. So I think that you're doing that. You embody that. So it's really inspiring.
It is.
Oh, thank you.
Right. And I think it also says, like, it doesn't matter where you are in life, how old you are, what your background is, where you live. Just do it, right? If your heart is calling you to do it, do it. And then I know in your situation, wasn't it because you got laid off too, and you were just like, okay,
what's next?
What's next?
Yeah. So basically, a little bit of background on that. So with Hera Travel, the reason I exited that startup was I just wasn't building it in a sustainable way. I wasn't traveling as much anymore because I was working nonstop and just wasn't in the best place for me. And I was like, this isn't actually how I want to build something like this. I want this to be full of joy. I want to get up and enjoy what I'm doing. So I exited that and then took a few months to take a little bit of a break, figure out my next steps. And then I took a job in April, didn't like it, but I was like, okay, it's paying the bills. It also was for a travel company. I was like, I will get something out of this. And then in October, I was laid off. They laid off 30% of the company. So it was a huge kind of layoff. And I just thought it was really funny because I was like, okay, the universe is telling me, no, go back to being an entrepreneur. And so this time I'm just doing it right. And I think that that also is part of what Wandering CEO really embodies is this concept of, I've always been ambitious. I know there's so many other women who like me have been ambitious and their careers really just kind of taken every aspect of their lives. And so I think the sentiment of having your career really work for you and really allow you to build the life that you want to live, and that you don't live to work, you work to live, and that kind of concept too. And so really just striking more of a balance is what the podcast is about too.
Yeah. Well, that is so inspiring.
that.
And,
Isn't she a rock star?
and I love that you talk about, an authentic experience when you travel and immersing yourself in the culture.
Yeah.
I think that more and more that's what people are looking for, is to really have like a unique experience, or at least just something that's a little bit more authentic, right? And not so
Yeah, absolutely.
thirsty. But it's a little bit harder to do with kids,
Yes.
I'm sure. But today we're talking more about solo travel
Mhm.
and couples travel. So
Yeah.
with that, how can our audience, I guess, what platform should they listen to get some really good tips on solo travel and couples travel?
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean,
of course. Yeah.
definitely, my travel blog and the
Well, that's
podcast.
what I'm saying. So which one do you think is
Oh, Champagne Flight is more focused on just travel. And then also another great avenue to get some of those tips is my weekly newsletter. I do send out travel tips as well in that. So I would recommend that. Wandering CEO has a bit more of the personal development side of things too. So like how travel can serve you. We really talk about that on the podcast. And then outside of, my own platforms, just like finding someone whose travel style mirrors your own and like kind of can inspire you. I think that's always really helpful to see another kind of maybe travel writer or influencer. And then, just kind of doing as much research as possible. I think talking to someone who has been somewhere is always really helpful too.
Yeah.
A lot of the issues with solo travel, and I'm saying issues, it's not actually an issue, but so maybe some of the fears that come with taking your first solo trip is just because it's kind of outside of your comfort zone. And so being able to talk to someone who has maybe done a solo trip or has traveled to the place that you're traveling to kind of quiets some of those insecurities maybe.
Yeah, and I like that point too, because like I take my parents for example, who don't fly. It's crazy, but they'll
Yeah.
go out of the country. But there are some people that just are domestic travelers, right?
Yeah.
And then there are other people that want to touch every continent. And so I think it's a really good point of like find those people that are taking the journeys that you see yourself potentially taking.
Absolutely. It's kind of that thing where you want to take advice from someone who has done the thing that you want to do. And on the flip side, don't ever take travel advice for someone who's never actually been to the place that you want to go to, because there's a lot of, different misconceptions about destinations. And so I've had that so much in my life. If I say I'm traveling to a certain country, people will be like, oh God, you shouldn't do that. And then you dig into it and they've never been there. They don't know anyone who's been there. And so it's just, you don't want to take advice from that person either.
Right. No, that makes a good point. So, if a person or a woman wants to, travel solo for her first time, what do you recommend? How to, what are some places where I think it would be good for that person as a beginner solo traveler to get started?
Yeah. So, what I always say when you're first starting out on solo travel is start really small, especially if solo travel is really outside of your comfort zone. There are ways to kind of experiment with it. So, go out to dinner by yourself in your own city, go take a day trip somewhere by yourself, then take a weekend trip somewhere, maybe domestically. I mean, you can really build up, and it depends on your comfort level. Maybe you skip some of those steps, but a lot of solo travelers actually are concerned about the concept of eating alone. And so, just having a meal alone is important. And when you solo travel, it doesn't mean you're going to be alone. You're going to meet people on the road. So you're going to find someone to share a meal with. But I think to kind of bolster your confidence, it's important to take those baby steps towards it. And then in terms of destinations that are good for solo travelers. Ones that are popular among solo travelers, I think are always a good first one. Any cities, I think, are easy too because it's easier to meet people. It really depends, I think, on your comfort level and maybe some regions of the world you've already explored before and maybe how you feel about a language. So, for example, I speak Spanish. I'm confident traveling in South America. Might not be the case for other people. Europe is a really easy place to take your first trip. Southeast Asia has a lot of solo travelers. Some of them are on the younger side, but the infrastructure is really built well for solo travelers and you'll meet people. So I would say any destination, you really could make your first solo trip. It just depends on what you want to get out of it and what you feel comfortable doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
My one of the reasons why like you came to mind when I was thinking about, okay, who can we bring on our podcast? My mother-in-law, unfortunately my husband's father passed away a little over a year ago, and they loved traveling, and they traveled all the time, and it might even be next month, she's taking her first solo trip.
Oh, so
And
exciting.
she's going to, is it Road Scholar? There's a group, I think that's what it might be called. But she's specifically going, I think it's like 2 states over, because she was like, here's the deal. If I hate it, I want to be able to
Yeah,
get back in my car
Yeah.
and just drive home.
absolutely.
I want it to be, easy and accessible, but know
Yes.
that if it's the world's worst experience,
Yeah.
I can get up. I can get
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
the best mentality to have. I definitely didn't do that for my first solo trip.
Where did you go for your first trip?
yeah.
So my first solo trip, I did to Germany, and I didn't go to, the big cities. I wasn't in Munich or Frankfurt. I decided to go to Germany off season, rent a car. I'd never driven abroad. So this is my first solo trip and I'm renting a car. And I drove the Romantic Road, which is like a bunch of like small, like storybook towns basically in Germany. It's called Romantic Road for a reason. It's very romantic, maybe not solo traveler. And it was also off season.
Travel.
Yeah, it's also off season. So it was just a lot of first in one trip where I was, first time renting a car. I was driving down the Autobahn, which is built for speed, obviously, and it's very safe, but it was still really nerve-wracking for how fast people were going. And then these tiny towns, and this was quite a while ago. So it didn't have like phone service all the time. And I went to one of the small towns and I was staying at hostels and nobody else was in the hostel that I was staying at. Not even any staff. They had my key taped to the door with my name on it, like at the entrance of the building. And I like let myself in. Nobody was there. And then I went into like my room and I was like, okay, maybe this wasn't the best idea for my first solo trip. So I would say that it's important to also think about what you want to get out of solo trips, because some people want to be alone. They take a solo trip because they want to have some of that, internal reflection and they want some alone time. But I'm an extrovert. I want a balance of both. And so, being completely alone in a place is not really my thing. So I think that's also important to think about.
You bring up a good point because we're a little older, and frankly, I can't necessarily see myself going on a solo trip, only because I think I'd be scared, like how I want to feel safe, right? So
Yeah.
would you say that do you ever recommend like cruises or like group tour trips for people who might want to do something
that
solo but still have a little bit of like a feeling of security, I guess, maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are great ways to still take a solo trip and then be around people, because I guess it goes back again to why you're taking the solo trip. A lot of people take solo trips because they don't have really anybody else to travel with, or there are other people in their lives who aren't able to travel as much as them, but they don't necessarily want to go and do it all by themselves. So I think organized trips are great for that. If you're into cruises, that's a good idea as well. Maybe even going and doing um like more like micro hotels, or like maybe some types of resorts that have people around you. I think there's different ways that you can have a community and still solo travel. And it's also a good way to, again, to like baby step your way to it. Because sometimes you're like, I don't want to have to do everything on my own and figure everything out. I think that's one of the rewarding parts of solo travel, is doing that. But I think there are so many other ways to still
Well, I'm glad
to
you
still
said
do that.
that because, why do you think that? Why do you think it's just better just to sort of go off the beaten path and off road? Like what are your some of your most memorable experiences doing that?
Yeah, so I think two of my favorite solo trips were to Guatemala and to the Philippines. And I think Guatemala is
Other land?
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
So the Philippines and Guatemala were two very different trips. Because Guatemala was actually the first solo trip that I took where I felt like I'd aged out of hostels. So I wanted to stay at hotels, and I was like curious to see how that would be. Um, and the reason why I like doing everything on my own is because there is nothing like the freedom when you wake up in the morning to go, nobody's depending on me. I don't have to show up anywhere at a certain time for the first time in your life, because in your day-to-day life, there is always something, right? So
Yeah.
it's the most freeing feeling to wake up and be like, if I want to sleep in all day, I can. No, like no one is going to say anything. If I want to go do this, I can. Like I have full control over my day. And I think that's such a beautiful thing because that's not something we normally have. And so I think that's really great. I think the confidence that you build too with doing things on your own
Yeah.
is
I
really,
saw that
really
on
valuable.
I want to listen to it. Was it a podcast episode you did that traveling solo
Yeah.
help build your confidence? So
Yes, absolutely.
bit more about that,
I love
because
that.
I think that's just so, I don't know if, I mean, I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah.
And then when I was like, oh, I'm going to have to listen to this later because
That's such a
think it's
good
great.
point, because we were talking in our last pod about being brave,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that was the theme of the last podcast. So um, I love that. So if you want to, yeah, elaborate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think travel in general can build your confidence, but definitely when you're doing a solo trip. So I think back to like driving on the Autobahn in Germany, and I couldn't read any of the signs because they were all in German. And one time I took this, like, I got off the Autobahn and I took this turn, and it was a really narrow road, and it was like really nerve-wracking. But at the end of the day, when I like my head hit the pillow, I felt really proud of myself because I was like, I navigated that all on my own. Like, I don't know anyone else who's done something like that. And I think that is the same case for just really anything in solo travel, that you are faced with these challenges, and then when you solve them yourself, it's really, really valuable. So I talk about this a little bit in the podcast episode, but in the Philippines, I ran out of so this was a rookie mistake. My trip to the Philippines, well, I was doing a month-long trip, and the Philippines part was solo. But the
Wow.
month-long trip straddled 2 different years. So I was doing like January in the Philippines, and my debit card expired at the end of the last year. And I didn't think about that. I didn't think about the fact that I was moving into a new year. So I'm in the Philippines. I'm ready to move to a different island. I go to withdraw cash because the island I was traveling to, I read everywhere that it was like pretty much cash only. I'm like, okay, no problem. I go to the ATM, my debit card's expired. And then I'm like, okay, I at least have like $200 like American bills.
Right.
Let me go exchange that. I go to exchange it. There's like a tiny faint pen mark on it, so they won't take it. So I'm like, I need to leave for the airport, and I'm panicking because I was like, I don't have any money. Like I'm almost out of money. And this was when I was still staying at hostels too. And I was like, I don't even have enough money to pay the hostel. And I was panicked. And so I started doing a bunch of research. I found like a really obscure blog post on how I could like get money from the US to a local bank.
Mhm.
So I'm texting my family, which by the way sounds really sketchy. It's the middle of the night for them. And I'm like, I need money sent to the Philippines.
That is a scam that is happening right now all across the world.
I know.
So,
I've heard.
wow. Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, long story short, I worked something out. I had my sister follow the blog post steps, and I got the money. But like even that, right? That could have been a potentially bad situation where I had to actually give my passport to the hostel because I couldn't pay them when I checked in because I couldn't go to the bank quite yet. And I was like, just hold on to this. I promise I'm going to pay you. So when you have these types of challenges and you solve them, I mean, that just takes your confidence to the next level. And not only within travel, but within your day-to-day life, because sometimes then when you come back and you're in your day-to-day life and you're presented with a challenge, you're like, I was able to like figure that out in the Philippines, or I like couldn't navigate a language here and I did that. So this is nothing. Like I can do this.
Yeah. That's
Wow.
such an incredible perspective. And it really, it's like you can take on the world, literally.
Yeah.
You can take on the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you mentioned rookie mistake.
Mm.
So let's say I want to plan my first solo trip, because other than traveling for business, which again, I've had plenty of dinners where I've eaten alone and I'm totally comfortable eating alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I'm usually going to a conference or I'm going to meetings. So I'm meeting up with other people.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So like, but let's say I'm going to plan my first solo trip. I've never done it. I'm going out of the country. What advice? What are the things I absolutely need to have in line and to just think about so that when I get to my destination, I'm not freaking out and I come home alive.
Yeah, no, totally fair. So one, I would say again, like start small, do a few days. Maybe if you're doing it internationally, do a few days and have like a friend meet you afterwards or something like that. Before any trip, it's really important to make sure your passport's not expiring within 6 months. A lot of places, it doesn't matter if you have 4 months until your passport expires. It needs to be at least 6 months. Otherwise, you can't fly. So definitely check your passport expiration. Check how many pages you have left at the end. If you travel quite a bit, this happened to me in Singapore. I had no blank pages left and I had to like beg them to let me through. They couldn't have anywhere to stamp. So check the amount of pages, make sure you have, your debit card, you have all the money kind of part handled. And this is really important. This might sound really specific that I'm talking about this because this add to your confidence and your security. Because at the end of the day, if you have like access to your funds, if you have your passport, you know that you can get out of a situation in case of an emergency. So that's really important. The next thing I would do to kind of feel a little bit more confident and prepared for the trip is a lot of the benefits of solo travel come from not planning out everything and having the flexibility to do what your day takes you. That being said, I would plan your first day out because you get to a destination, you might feel a little overwhelmed. Sometimes just getting from the airport to wherever you're staying, that can also be kind of frustrating sometimes. And so just have maybe that first dinner and the first day planned out, and that'll kind of ease yourself into it. And then you can say, okay, I know exactly what I was doing that first day. And now I can say, like, where do I want to go today? Or what should I do here? So I think that's really important, is to kind of set yourself up for success in that way. And then, of course, as you travel more, you can decide if you want to do it that way. And I think also just like doing your research and being prepared and having as much information is important.
Yeah.
So, Priyanka, when you go on these solo trips, I mean, I'm sure you meet a lot of people, but are you
Because
are
she's
you,
so shy. Look at how
I,
she's shy.
Very
are,
shy.
are you seeking out companionship? Are you really just going just to be alone? Like, is it a mix usually for you? And how do you meet people if you do want to, I guess, just make new friends? So.
Yeah, so I think I'll talk to Guatemala because that was the last solo trip that I did. And again, that was one where I didn't stay in hostels, I stayed in hotels. And so for me, I think it depends on, again, the reason for doing a trip. So the context of Guatemala was right before I decided to exit Hera Travel. And so I had a lot of just like emotions and soul searching, and I wanted to come back from that trip with a decision on what I wanted to do. So for me, a lot of like introspection time was really important. And I liked that about staying at a hotel. Like I got to pick and choose when I wanted to be around people, because at a hostel, you're like constantly surrounded by people. And again, I've definitely aged out of those. Like love them, time and place, but like I want my own room. I want a comfortable bed. I want like the room to be clean. So I think in those situations, when you can kind of control how much time you spend with people, that's good, because you can strike that balance. And then how you actually meet people. I love doing like food tours or walking tours. Again, too, it depends on like who you're trying to meet. So like I think like a food tour is nice because then you already have like a common interest. Like if you're meeting other foodies, and then you can say, oh, do you want to like meet up later? Grabbing a drink at a bar, you like if you're open to making conversation with someone. I met these group of expats at a bar in Guatemala. I was just having a drink at the bar, and then I heard them talking English. So I started talking to them. I spent the rest of the evening like hanging out with them. I still follow them on Instagram. So there's a lot of ways that you can meet people when you're traveling, if you're just open to kind of pushing yourself out of your comfort zone a little bit, maybe, and approaching somebody. Sitting at communal tables whenever possible, that's important. So you have to get a little bit more creative if you're not staying in a hostel. But I think that also, again, is more rewarding because you get to pick and choose when you want to be social.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Are there any online communities
Yeah.
that you can tap into? Let's say you're going to Europe and you're in London and you're like, oh, I'm here alone, but maybe there's like an online community that is getting together for a happy hour, or for some, some sort of retreat. Does that exist?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two big Facebook groups. There's Girls Love Travel, and then there's a solo travel one for women too. I can't quite remember the name. but I think it has the word solo travel and like women or ladies in it. And so I know those are pretty active in large groups that people post in. There also are groups then specific to the region that you're traveling to. So you could also search for those. I've seen I've seen plenty of posts in those where someone's saying, I'm in this city for these days, like who can meet up? And that was part of the goal with Hera Travel. So maybe one day I'll create something like that too.
Fantastic concept. But
Yeah.
listen, I believe life takes us where we're supposed to go.
Agreed.
And again, you may go back to that, but
Yeah.
it is an incredible concept. And if anyone can build it, it's you, because you've traveled so much.
Yeah.
I want to know where your favorite place is that you've ever traveled. But before you tell me that,
Yeah.
let's talk safety a little bit. So,
Mhm.
The same thing.
right? Like,
Yep.
because I remember years ago when I was recruiting for my alma mater and I traveled all over the country, they specifically would not let us stay in hotels that had exterior
Mhm.
doors to the
Room.
rooms.
Yeah.
So more like a
Oh.
motel, you couldn't. You had to stay in a hotel where
There's
you come in and there's hallways
Yeah,
and there's an
yeah.
elevator. But that's just like one tiny little tip. So like, what are some of the things that you recommend in terms of like making sure
Increasing your safety level.
I feel safe
Yeah.
no matter what?
Yeah, so it's a great question. When it comes to where you're staying, I recommend if you're a solo traveler to either do a hostel or a hotel. I don't recommend Airbnbs because of exactly what you just said, where, someone could follow you as you're going to unlock your door or something like that. And again, I mean that like it's just like a thing that if you feel confident and you want to do an Airbnb, it's just something I personally am like, I'd rather go somewhere where I know there's a front desk that's there, it's well lit, all of that. So either stay in a hostel or a hotel. Then what I do is I search the reviews and I specifically search for solo travel if I'm solo traveling. And there will be people who say this was a great hotel for a solo traveler, or I felt really safe here, or I search for safety. Because I think just taking reviews that are if it's highly rated, that's great, but you don't know like why it's highly rated necessarily. So I think just like doing a little bit of research within the reviews is really important. I also too, when I get to a destination and I'm traveling solo, I usually like to ask the front desk, especially if a woman is working, and ask her like, is it safe for me to walk around like at night? Because I want like a local woman's perspective on it. I did that in Guatemala and she was like, yep, it's perfectly safe. Maybe not like super late at night, but it's safe to do that. So I would consider, just for safety perspective too, if you are worried about that, like maybe don't be out really late at night. Maybe like, okay, I'm going to come home at a certain time. But I think like just being able to talk to the front desk sometimes and introduce yourself too. Like I'll be like, hey, I'm, traveling solo and like, if you have any tips or anything like that, I think that's helpful because they're also looking out for you a little bit more too. And then I tend to make sure I have a certain time of the day that I'm checking in with my family back home. I send them my full itinerary. They know the hotel, they know the phone number. And then I'm like, every morning before I leave to go hang out for the day, I'm going to send you a text. And that way they know like they should be hearing from me. So setting up little like safety checks like that, I think are really important. And then at the end of the day, it's like about trusting your gut. Like no matter what, even if you are in one of the safest places in the world, if you don't feel like you're in the situation, it feels wrong to you, just get out of there. I think trusting your gut's really, really important and keeping your wits about you. So because safety can be such a subjective thing and it depends on how you feel, it depends on your confidence level, it depends on your experience. So I think it's really important to trust your gut and just kind of exercise some common sense too. Maybe don't get super inebriated by yourself in a dark place, things like that. Yeah.
That's right.
No,
That's exactly right.
no, it's true. Women have to worry about that even without having to.
Yes.
Slow
Yeah.
down. So
Yes.
it's like, you just have to be extra cautious.
Absolutely.
I think, in those, in any of those situations. So to um, add to Maya's interest in what were your besides the Philippines and Guatemala, which I think is really cool that you mentioned those two, but what are some of your other favorite destinations that for solo or romantic travel with your significant other? So
Yeah, so I've been traveling a lot with my fiance. We do still do some solo trips. He did a solo trip to Norway, and that's when I did mine to Guatemala. But mostly now we travel together, which has been really great because we have a really similar travel style. And so a lot of my favorite countries that I have been to have been in the like recently. So I've traveled a lot. I've been to over 60 countries. And a lot of them I've traveled back to, but my favorite ones are Georgia. That was a country that was on my list for so long. It's just a place that has such a special place in my heart. It's a birthplace of wine. It's where my fiance proposed, so it's like a really just special place. The food is amazing, so that's probably like my absolute favorite country. And then sorry.
Where is that located in? I'm not a geography person, so where exactly is that?
Yeah, so Georgia's near Armenia and like Russia, Ukraine, that kind of area.
I got
Yeah. So yeah, definitely Georgia. Greece, that's where we're getting married. So it's also just one of my favorite places. I've been back quite a bit too. It's just somewhere that there's so much to explore there. And then the other two, I know you said one, but I'm giving you four. The other two are South Africa and Japan. Those are probably my top.
Wow, that is super cool. And
Yeah.
If you want to go to Japan, go read it's your latest blog.
Yes. Yeah. I've have like a lot of posts on it. I have like tips before your trip, foodie guides, itineraries. Yeah. I've been putting a lot of content on the blog about Japan.
amazing. So there's a blog for every country you've ever been to, or every city.
Yeah, so not every country. I started the blog pretty like quite a bit after I'd done a lot of travel. But at least recently, a lot of the places are on there. So yeah, like South Africa, Georgia, Japan, all of those are on. The Greece is on there too.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I just found out that my husband's cousin is getting married in Greece too.
Oh yeah, exciting.
They're there right now. I don't know where they're getting, but once I find out all I thought of you immediately.
Yeah.
So I will be going to Greece in 2025. I know that.
Nice.
I'm hoping it was going to be before that. Maybe it still will be. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it leads me to my next question. So I was like, if we do Greece this year and then Greece again, like money, right? A lot of people, for them, they think they can't travel because they're not a millionaire, right? They don't make the money. So what are some of your tips for traveling affordably, like getting the best deals? Because travel could be available to anybody.
Yes.
It's just, digging, it's finding those resources. So what's some of your advice?
Yeah, I mean, I have traveled at so many different stages of my life. I've traveled as like the broke college student. I traveled as like, the underpaid first job out of college person. And like those times, what's really important to do is if you want to get like the best deal possible, be really flexible with your dates and be flexible with the destination as well. So one time I went to Panama because I literally went to Skyscanner. It's a website. You can also use Google Flights. And I put like the US to everywhere. And I looked at what the cheapest flight was, and it was like $300 round trip to Panama. And then my next search was, is Panama safe? And then I booked my flight. That's pretty much how I did that at the age of, 22. So I think being really flexible with dates, destination is important. If you're not flexible with your destination, that's fine. Traveling in the off season, you can find a lot of deals. I mean, you can frequently find deals to Europe for $400 round trip, $500 round trip, especially in the off season. And the off season will also be helpful because then hotels are cheaper. There's plenty of places that you can travel to depending on where you're traveling from. So if you're traveling from, the US, there's plenty of places that are, have a lower cost of living. And so they're cheaper, like food and hospitality wise. So I think that's important. And then the other way to like just find good deals on flights is if you are really into learning about travel hacking and using points and miles to earn free flights. That's also that's a way that I love to travel. Like we haven't paid for a flight in a long time.
Wow, just because you use your points and stuff.
Yes.
Too. So what are the best point programs, I guess, for that you can recommend?
Yeah, so I think getting into points, it can definitely be something that can be frustrating. You have to be like really interested in learning about it. I really nerd out about it, so I love it. But I think like my fiance is like, that's really overwhelming to me. So I think you have to like start small so it doesn't get overwhelming. So the best way to earn points is through credit cards. So my like favorite ones are the Chase Sapphire Preferred, Capital One Venture X. So I mean, those are just two to like start off with. And then the basics that I will say for that is instead of just using your points, in the travel portal. So Chase has a travel portal. You can look and see like how many points will you need. Let's say you're traveling to Athens. Look at the travel portal, but then the big tip that I'll give you is to look at who the travel partners are that you can transfer your points to, because normally those will be a better redemption for you. So let's say it says like 60,000 in the Chase portal. If you go and look at the travel partners, you might find one that says 40,000, and it's as easy as creating an account on those travel partners and doing the searches. So it can be, a bit like tedious to go through and search. But to me, when you actually find the redemption and, you don't have to spend, or you'll spend very little like taxes and fees, I find that really rewarding. So I think it's really nice to do. But that's where I would start off without it being too overwhelming.
That's a great tip.
That's a really
And what is the off season? I mean, like, does every region have a different off season?
Yeah. So for example, for Greece, like they're really popular in the summer. So shoulder to off season, shoulder season means the months right before and after the peak season. So if Greece is really popular, let's say like July through beginning of September, traveling in May or June or October, you'll still probably have good weather, but you'll have a lot cheaper just on the hotels and everything. So every region, every country, what I would do is Google like what's the peak season for this
Right.
place.
Yeah.
I love traveling off season, shoulder season. I hate crowds.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay astronomical prices for hotels. So I think that's a really important tip. Plus, it's more sustainable if you're looking for sustainable travel. It helps spread your tourism dollars throughout the year. So it's also just, being a good person.
No, that's all great.
I was just going to ask you something. And
Yeah.
well, there's my memory.
There's your
again.
minute
There's
for the
my
day.
minute for the day. Well, okay, let me ask you this question while I think of the other one to come back to me. Where's the next place you want to go? Where's like
Ooh,
your
that's a good one.
dream destination that
Ugh.
you haven't gone to yet?
That's tough. I haven't really thought through so this year I feel like I checked off like a lot of dream destinations with Japan and Georgia. So I think I'd like to in this next year I really want to focus on underrated wine regions. That's just something I'm really, really interested in. So anywhere really that has like more of an underrated wine region, I think is going to be on the list, but I haven't really done as much research yet. I'm going to India at the beginning of February for wedding dress shopping, and then the wedding is in Greece. So I've been really focused on those two destinations right now.
You're planning a wedding, whatever. Anyone can do that. No, just
Yeah, right.
well, it's interesting too because when you were talking about like planning your wedding, planning travel affordably, it's the same concept of if you want to plan your wedding on a budget.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
do everything in the off season. Get married on a
Yep.
Thursday. Don't get
Yep.
married on a Saturday, right? So
Yeah.
it is that same concept. But I do remember my two questions I had for you.
Mm.
One, also, what about like miles with airlines? Okay.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite airline? So it's actually it's three questions. So how do you feel about miles with airlines, and do you have a favorite airline? And then domestically, what are some of your favorite destinations?
Oh, yeah. Great questions. So the airline miles is the same thing that we were talking about with miles and points. And so the credit card is a great way to get those miles and points, but you can then transfer them to airlines. So I don't have a favorite airline. And the reason for that is if you want to get more like affordable flights, being open to other airlines is really important. So
Okay.
I don't personally have a favorite airlines. One of the best experiences I've had on airlines is Singapore in first class that I flew on points. So I was literally broke grad student flying back from the Philippines. And I had enough points and miles to get the first class. And it was the most luxurious experience ever. And I felt like I was treated like royalty. And I thought it was hilarious because I had like, barely any money left to my name. And so I thought that was pretty
So
funny.
you guys rubbed together, and there you were getting like champagne.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It's once you've done first class, we went first class to Italy for our honeymoon, and it's only because Bobby was a pilot
Yeah.
and he had a pilot friend. When they have their family and friend passes, they have to use them by a certain time.
Mhm.
And he
Nice.
happened to be stationed with him in Qatar, and he was like, "I'm not going to be back. Why don't you and your wife take
Yeah.
me?" And I was like, "What?" And it's like when my
That's
seat
amazing.
turned into
Best
a
thing
bed.
ever.
Yes,
It's
it's the
like
best.
I didn't even.
I know.
What? Are you kidding me? Yeah. So you get a little bit spoiled, and then it's hard to
Oh,
go. It's hard to go.
Yeah.
back to.
Before children, we flew first class a few times, and I'm like, oh man, why did I do that? 'Cause now it's like it's hard to go back.
It
Especially
is.
if you're doing international travel.
Yep.
because you know
It's
that-
very hard. Yeah, that's like to this day I talk about that experience because it was so incredible. And again,
now.
getting it on points made it worth it. So
Let's talk
so
about
yeah, that's what I would say is yeah, don't necessarily unless you're trying to build status on an airline, I wouldn't necessarily be like loyal to a particular airline. So people have different strategies for that. And then favorite places in the US. I love Asheville, North Carolina. So that's one of my favorite places. I've been back quite a few times. A great foodie scene, great breweries. I think during COVID, I was able to do more national parks. So Zion National Park, I did Glacier National Park, Sedona. All of that is, I think, just really great if you want to get outside. Where else do I really love in the US? So many places. I love going to New York. I mean, I think like going to New York is just, um,
That's right.
yeah. And New Orleans, I think, is cool too. Good.
Have you ever driven cross country?
I have not driven across country. No, that's definitely something on the bucket list. I feel like when it comes to travel, sometimes it's hard because you prioritize international travel more than domestic travel. I've definitely traveled quite a bit domestically. But I feel like when you look at sometimes the cost of traveling to the West Coast versus to Europe, especially from Boston, it's faster and cheaper most of the times to get to Europe than it is to, California. It's hard to be like, okay, now I'm gonna, drive or even just driving across the country and the prices of hotels in the US are so much more.
Absolutely.
I have a question. So back to the whole first class thing. When you're doing international travel, do you think that flying business or premium economy is worth it? Is it worth spending the extra dollars, especially if you're going to be in the air for,
12 hours.
whatever? I mean, exactly 6 to 12 hours. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it's completely personal decision when it comes to actually paying the dollar figure. So for me, using my points and miles strategy, it's much easier to use that on economy, but I actually only use it on business class tickets internationally. And for me, it's because I also kind of just nerd out about like trying a new business class product. And I think like flying business class and first class is as much a part of the experience as like part of the trip is itself. Like I really, really love it. I get really excited about every part of it. And so for me, it's worth it to spend the extra time and more points and maybe a little bit more in the dollars and fees to fly and to get the redemption for business and first class. I haven't paid out of pocket for one of them, so that I think it depends on just kind of what you'll stomach for it. A lot of times, what I would say is if you book an economy or premium economy ticket, sometimes they release upgrades at the last minute that actually aren't that much. So that happened to me when I flew to Jordan with my older sister. We were booked in economy tickets, and then last minute you could like bid on an upgrade, and so we bid on the upgrade, and it wasn't that much, and it was a 9-hour flight that we got to sit in business class for.
That's a great other.
That's a
That's
really good
keep
tip.
your eye out for upgrade. Nothing like a good upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think about like our audience is a little older than your audience. Well, maybe not old, but we definitely skew to a little bit of a older audience. And I think about we just came back from Florida. I told you we're on like
Yeah.
my knees were up my nose. Okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
And within 2 minutes, my back pain is like off the charts.
Yeah.
And I just have horrible ailments.
Yeah.
And so for me, and I think this goes back to what you're saying, like personal, like if I'm
Yes.
going to fly longer than 5 hours, I'm going to bite the bullet and I'm going to
Yeah.
do business class
And
or first class because I have to be able to have the room. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm going to be miserable to the people I'm sitting next
Yeah.
to.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. No,
yeah.
again, I think it's personal. I have like a bad knee. And so anytime I want a really long flight, it's tough to be in economy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mm.
So one other question for me, when it comes to technology, when you're traveling, because everyone wants to stay connected, do you find it fairly easy? Like, is there anything you need to do with your phone carrier these days? In terms of like bringing, like a hair dryer or something, do you pack those things, and is it, you know, can they easily plug into where your, outlets that you're staying in? Like, what are your recommendations for technology?
Yeah, so for phone wise, I have T-Mobile, and I use that because you don't have to do anything when you travel abroad. Your phone works the same way. If you have an unlocked phone and your phone has the capability of doing an eSIM, there's a lot of eSIM providers now that you can just buy the eSIM when you land, and your phone will then work locally. Which this is a much better option than how it used to be, where I'd go and then have to go to a local phone store and change out my SIM card and all of this stuff. I would do that every time I traveled. And so that I think it's important to have some type of connection. Even with the eSIMs, you have the option of just doing data. But if you're driving or using a lot of public transit, just being able to use Google Maps and like messaging, I think is important. So I would recommend that also when it comes to safety too, like having some type of phone connection, I think is important. And then for like electronics and all that, just doing some research on where you're headed to see, is the plug different, and is the voltage different, and then you can have a converter or adapter. There are ones that are just universal. The one I have is you can change, like, based on where you are traveling to, you can change what's on the backside, like the actual plug part, and it's like an all-in-one type of thing. So I just always travel with that. But there are, like, when I went to Japan, for example, I didn't need anything. I could just plug my thing right into the wall. So it depends on the actual like plug for where you're traveling to.
That's really great. That universal plug. That's a
Yeah.
really great
Mhm.
point too, because no, that's
I need-
and you sometimes need them on cruise lines as well. So that's
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, there you
yeah.
go. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Surprising.
and then when you don't buy them before you travel, you're paying a premium. You're paying like 9 times more than they're actually worth.
Yeah.
when
You can
to get to that
easily get it on
destination.
Amazon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Amazon has it.
So what are the things that you like, the top 10 items that you do not leave home without when you're traveling internationally?
When I'm traveling internationally, top 10 things. So obviously like passport, credit card. You want a credit card with no international fees. So that way that doesn't add up. So like that Chase Sapphire, that's a good one for no international. Let's see, what else do I make sure I don't leave home without? I think like headphones, like I think are really good, like important to have. A good book or your iPad or Kindle. That's really important. I mean, honestly, when I leave the home, as long as I have my passport and a credit card, that like makes me feel like, okay, I can figure out anything else, because you're probably going to forget something. And so I think those are like the most important things to have. I travel really light. My fiance and I travel in a backpack.
Hmm.
So we travel like just the one bag. We don't do multiple bags. So because of that, we don't really like bring a lot of stuff with us. But I always at least have the iPad. The universal converter, I think, is really important. I sometimes have the little there's like an adapter that you can put into like the headphone jack on the plane that'll let you connect to your AirPods, so you don't have to have one that fits into the plane like that. But other than that, yeah, I'm just kind of like, okay, as long as I have a passport and a credit card.
Yeah.
So we talked about this one time. I think we talked about this when we were in Baltimore together. Because you don't check bags, you mostly carry on, correct?
Yes.
So do you
Yeah.
have like a capsule wardrobe? Like what are your
Yep.
essential
Yes.
pieces that you
I
take
want
with
to
you?
know too.
Like what Penny has, I wish you could see what she is on this fabulous like sweat.
It's
I mean,
just a
but
sweatsuit.
she could wear, I'm like looking at her when
From
she walked in,
Zara.
I was like, are we going somewhere? Are we traveling?
Nice
Like,
though.
because she could wear this so many different ways. So like,
That's awesome.
do you have a capsule
Yeah.
wardrobe, and tell like
Yeah.
what are the pieces?
Yeah, I do have a capsule wardrobe. I'm still working on building it out. Honestly, my fiance is the one who inspired me to do that. He has this like perfect capsule and he travels in a backpack. And I was like, oh, I want to try that too. So I will say, like, I think there's always this like hype around like minimal travel and stuff. Like, do what you want to do. It's like, if you want to check in your bag, please check in your bag. Don't let anyone like tell you how you should do things. But if you do want to travel more minimally, the reason I love traveling in a backpack is one, I don't have to check in a bag ever. And then two, it's just really easy. If I have to walk from somewhere with my stuff, then for 15, 20 minutes, I can easily do that without having to drag something with me. So I've personally found a lot of benefits traveling that way. But yeah, I know that there's like the community that'll like shove it down your throat. So I don't want to do that. And then what I have in my capsule. So usually when I travel, I will pack like a couple of like versatile bottoms. So maybe like a pair of jeans and like a trousers and then like leggings. And then the tops, what's really important when it comes to a capsule is just making sure everything works with all the tops should work with all the bottoms, and then having layering pieces to change the look of it too. So maybe like a white button up that you can put on top of something, or like a lighter layer, like a blazer or a jean jacket. Those are really those pieces I travel with a lot. And then I'll change out what I have kind of underneath. Maybe it's like a simple blouse, or I'll have like one nicer and dressier one. And so what I would do is just like make sure you can make as many combinations as possible. And then like you usually need less than you think anyways, because
My
like
God.
how many times do we not wear what we pack?
Let me just say this. I used to be the girl that would get there to check in her bag and they're like, I'm sorry, ma'am, this weighs 60 pounds. You're going to have to leave that. And my husband would sit there and be like, seriously? He finally understood, right? But now I literally travel on a carry-on.
Oh,
And
good. Yeah.
even with this trip, and it was 5 days to Florida, so it wasn't a super long trip. But even in my carry-on, I only wore 30% of what I took. And it was,
Yes.
I think I'm going to write a blog of like, you've inspired my new blog
Yes.
post. But it's because even when we went through, now we're TSA pre-check. I went through security yesterday and they're like, ma'am, you have too many layers on. You need, I'm like, I'm taking my pre-check. I shouldn't have to take off anyway, long story short. But I layer getting on the plane because I also tend to run cold. And you know, you turn those air and then I'm freezing to death. So I always recommend layer as you travel. Because you can
absolutely.
if you're freezing like me, you'll be happy that you layered.
Yep.
But it's a little bit of a science, and sometimes it takes time. But again, I'm not trying to like downgrade like women over 50 because I think we're amazing human beings. But another reason why I went from the 60-pound bag to a carry-on is my damn back. I can't, I'm not. And I just remember leaving Italy in the pouring rain. We were in Venice, my husband and I. And if you've ever been to Venice in the pouring rain,
not great.
don't want to walk to Venice in the pouring. He had both of our backpacks, both of our luggage, like he was like Hercules walking to the train and I'm like, I'll never do this to you ever again. I have to be able to carry my own luggage, and that's the benefit of.
So do you have a backpack, Priyanka? Is it more of a backpack type of bag that you use?
So it's like specifically designed for travel, like for this type of travel. The one I have is the Manal 3.0 carry-on. I love it's like a whole clamshell opening, so it opens fully as like kind of like a suitcase. It's got a good like electronics compartment because I'm usually traveling with my laptop and my iPad. And I mean, I think it's pretty spacious for what it is. It also looks really slim, even when it's really packed out. So people think it's smaller than it is. The size of it is pretty much, forgot how many liters it is, but it is basically, I mean, it's a carry-on. It's not like a personal item. And it's not a checked bag. So it's like a carry-on size. So, I mean, it fits everything pretty well. And I could still bring a personal item. I tend to just bring that bag because I just like the convenience of not having more things to worry about.
And there's nothing more embarrassing when you're traveling internationally and you're like rolling your luggage down the street.
I don't know.
Like cobblestone streets and you're like struggling.
It also screams tourist. Like, hello.
Yes.
So, again, I think to me, that's kind of like a underlying kind of safety tip for, female solo travelers. Like if you just bring one bag, you can camouflage yourself a little bit. You can kind of look like, you belong.
I actually do recommend, like as a safety tip for solo travelers, I do also recommend like packing light, because it kind of goes back to what you said. If you can't carry your own stuff, someone's going to have to carry it for you. It's harder for you to keep an eye on your things, and you're like more dependent on other people. Like it needs to be easy for you to carry. You need to be able to like get around really quickly. I like, because I just have the backpack, like if we're on the metro or we're in a taxi, like I can have the bag right there with me, and it just makes me feel more secure that I have it on me like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
All right, well, let's try to wrap things up a little bit only
Yeah.
for the time. We want to be respectful
do
of
some
her. I
rapid
mean,
fire?
we'll have to get you back and talk again.
Yes,
yeah.
sure.
Let's do it. We'll
Yeah.
get to know you in 2.5 minutes. Travel aside, we're going to ask you some fun rapid fire questions.
Sure.
That you won't have to overthink it, I promise.
Okay.
Okay, favorite food. I know you're vegan, right? Are you vegan?
I'm vegetarian, but yeah.
Vegetarian, okay.
Favorite
You worry
food, it's
about
probably a
food.
burrito, like a really good
All right.
burrito.
You and my husband, he loves
Yeah.
a good burrito. Do you have a favorite book?
So my favorite book I read a ton, so favorite book changes quite a bit. I would say recently in the last year, the best personal development book that I read that I really liked was Make Time. And
Okay.
then the best fiction book I read was A Gentleman in Moscow, which is just really beautifully written.
Okay.
That's
Awesome.
cool.
Good.
Okay. Favorite movie?
Lord of the Rings.
All right.
Nice.
TV series. Do you have a favorite TV series?
Um, that also I think is hard to pick, but I love Schitt's Creek. That's probably one that I could watch over and over again.
I feel like I'm doing a little Daniel. I'm like vibing a little Daniel today because
I love it.
keep it on the show.
Yeah.
Only because of my glasses
Yeah.
that I have on today.
I love those, by the way.
Thank you.
Favorite beauty brand?
Favorite beauty brand. I don't really know if I have a favorite beauty brand, to be honest.
I have several, but
Yeah, I think that's for most women. That's a tough one for all of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about fashion? Do you have a favorite fashion brand?
No, again, I'm like pretty much like a go with, because I have the capsule, I'm looking for specific pieces. So I'm usually like open to the
Okay.
fashion brand too.
nice. Any favorite trends that you're enjoying right now?
Favorite
Anything. Travel, food.
um I think a favorite trend, I mean, just with travel, I think like the way I've been traveling is trending a little bit more like slower travel, more off the beaten path, more sustainable. So I am enjoying that that's becoming a little bit more popular.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's really great. I didn't even think about it that way. But
Yeah.
Really, really good.
So who is your shiro?
Yeah, so I feel like that changes for me too. And the reason for that is like any woman who is really just being a badass and who is able to be a few steps ahead of me and is like really carved the path, I think is someone to look up to. So I don't really necessarily have just one person, because I think there are so many women that you can have as an example, and that they all inspire you in different ways. So pretty much like any woman living her authentic self and doing the damn thing is my shiro.
Yeah, girl. Mhm.
Did you have any mentors?
Yeah, I've had different mentors along the way, like some through the accelerator that we did. I've had some through business school and college, and my first boss at Bank of America too. Like she was really inspirational just for someone who's 22 years old, to see how she was someone who really just commanded respect in the room and had like a really like beautiful balanced life, at least from the outside looking in, where she had these kids. She was a great mom, she was a wonderful leader, she was a great mentor. So yeah, I've had quite a few mentors in my life.
That's awesome. Yeah. She sounds like my old boss
Mhm.
at Amex. But
Do you have a mantra? I want to
Yeah.
know what's your mantra. Do you have what do you live by?
Yeah, so I guess I have like a word of the year that I'm like
We can fit
focused
that.
on.
What's
So
your
like
word for 2024 then? What's your word for 2024?
so it's intention. So everything that I'm doing this year, I'm doing with intention. And this kind of ties back to some of that like burnout that I faced, and just like realizing this is also part of the Make Time book. Like, I don't want to do more in a day. I want to do everything for a reason and just be really intentional about my time and how I spend my time and how I, grow my business and all of that. So I think that that's what I'm living by this year.
I love that. We just started this exercise, and it's only because I saw a social media post about it, and I was like, Penny, let's pick our words for 2024.
Yeah.
So what's your word for
mine was inspired, because I have been so inspired just in the last few months, because I've sort of gained some freedom. I'm no longer tied to my brick and mortar, so it's just a new world.
Yeah.
It's
And
awesome.
I'm inspired by other people,
Mhm.
like yourself.
Mhm.
And I'm inspired that I get to start something new and
Yeah.
That's
pivot.
awesome.
So,
And mine was simplify.
Oh,
I'm
yes,
like,
like it.
I just
Yeah.
have to stop moving at this frenetic pace and start having a startup, having any business,
Yes.
whether it's in startup mode, growth mode, exit mode,
Yes.
it can take all of you.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's simplification.
I love that. I think both of your words sort of tie in together too.
Definitely.
Because when you own your own business and you have to find balance, and if you don't have balance and intention and simplification of what you're trying to achieve, you can get really overwhelmed very fast.
Yeah.
And sort of lose the whole, like, what's this for again?
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Superpower. Do you have any superpowers?
Yeah. What's your superpower?
Ooh, what does a superpower mean? like
Something you're really good
Something
at.
travel.
Oh yeah.
Other than
uh,
what is one thing that like you own that you think you own better than other people?
I guess my superpower would be to be able to really listen to what other people need and give actionable advice. I think that that's something that my friends are always saying that I'm really good at. And so I think just like having that perception.
Absolutely. That's
Very
a
cool.
good one.
I love that.
That's a really good one. All right. One more.
Sure.
Ask her this one because I want to know where she wants to retire.
Okay.
Well,
yeah.
so well traveled.
Exactly. Your dream retired life. Where do you see yourself retiring?
Oh, in Portugal on a winery with my fiance having like a farm to table restaurant that he does for fun.
Wow, that is
Wow.
so specific. I'm so
Yeah.
glad we asked that question.
That's amazing. So he's a chef.
So he is an amateur chef. Like he doesn't do it professionally, but he could easily do it professionally. He's an incredible cook. He's a software developer on his day job, but and because I'm so into wine, I think that would be a really cool retirement.
Well, maybe you'll inspire him to do his own blog or pod.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Exciting. I see a joint thing happening here.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And we're a bit older than you, but if we're still alive, we'll come visit you in Portugal.
We'll still be alive.
You will still be alive.
I'm gonna
we will
ride this train till the wheels
we
fall
will.
off.
Yeah. Priyanka, I can't wait for Penny to meet you in person. So at some
Yes.
point, she and I will take a trip to Boston. And,
Yes, that'd be great.
And then we
Yes.
can all dine together. But
Love that.
I love you to pieces.
I love you too.
I love that you have just owned your presence and your present, and you have such a vivid view of where you want to go in this life, and especially where you want to retire. I think that in itself is super important. And just keep kicking ass, girl. Like
Yes.
Thank you.
yeah,
Yes.
you are doing the damn thing.
Oh, thank you.
are doing it.
You are.
Really
And
are.
thank God you started young, because
I'm
know,
jelly. I'm super jealous.
you're an inspiration to a lot of people, not just us. I mean, just the fact that you are,
Very sweet.
following your passion and just doing it.
Well, we'll
Just
have
like
to
Maya said.
play this podcast for our children so that they can be because again, we can't travel at 20, we're past 20, but our kids are approaching.
Yes.
And I've always said to my daughter, like, I want and RJ, our son, like, and actually he's going to Panama for the second time for spring break.
Oh, nice.
We love
Yeah.
but like we are
Really
we're
great.
about, like, go travel the world,
Yeah.
go, because I wish I had done that more when I was younger.
Yeah.
And
I want to hear more about your mom's adventures. I know you spoke
yeah.
a little
Oh, yes.
about the fact that she's, retired and living her best life and traveling more and doing some really incredible trips.
Climbing mountains.
Literally.
Yes. Climbing mountains. Yep.
But so to everyone listening, check out Priyanka's blog, Champagne Flight, and her podcast, Wandering CEO. She's extraordinary, and she's going to be constantly delivering incredible content for you.
Yes.
So,
And where can they follow you on Instagram?
oh yeah.
I'm at p.s.juneja. So my last name, Juneja.
Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And we'll put that.
Very
We'll
cool.
tag you and everything as
Yes,
well,
for sure.
and make sure that you can share it. But thank
Awesome.
you, girl.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Love ya.
Bianca.